I honestly never thought that I would actually be making another video about this man. I never thought that I would actually be talking about YandereDev ever again. Matter of fact, that one video where I said that it was hopefully the final YandereDev update video, I pretty much meant it. I wanted that one to be the last video that I would ever have to make on YandereDev. What I'm essentially saying right here for this intro is, I intended my original video that I titled as the last YandereDev update video to actually be the last one. I never really intended to make any other videos after that one, and I wanted it to stay that way. And yes, he did in fact finally release the game that he promised to release for the past 6, almost 7 years, but you know, it's pretty much about as lackluster, buggy, and laggy as one would expect it to be. The thing is that I pretty much promised myself that I would never touch YandereDev again. I would never touch the entire situation of Yandere Simulator or YandereDev unless the man himself ended up doing something that was extreme. Anything that was basically just kind of completely out there in every single sense of the word. And, well, let me just say this right now, you are not going to be disappointed, because apparently this man really wants to double down on the fact that he's just the most garbage human being in human history. So here's the thing, this all pretty much ended up kind of starting off when apparently, well, he was in like a voice chat during one of his streams, you know, one of his moderators or something, which that moderator, in which, you know, I'll put a link in the description below. There's an entire Reddit post about this on the Osana subreddit, which is essentially, you know, a Yandere Simulator subreddit, but without, you know, YandereDev basically being Kim Jong-un on it. But, you know, on that one, there was a moderator that ended up leaving on his own accord after all this ended up happening, that basically, you know, ended up talking a lot about all this that ended up happening. And one of the other moderators on the Discord ended up joining, was actually, you know, within this voice call, within the live stream, and that moderator actually has a little something called dissociative identity disorder, or DID for short. And essentially, you know, it's kind of one of those things where you pretty much have two distinct personalities. You have your normal self, and then you have some other personality that will just take over at random. I think that's pretty much correct, although I'm not a psychologist, and I'm pretty much just kind of basing this off of, you know, the limited experience that I pretty much have of kind of looking this stuff up. That's pretty much the long and short of what it is. Well, you see, this moderator was pretty much, you know, under the influence of this, you know, other identity, and that was a weird way for me to phrase it, but we're just gonna go with it. And, you know, he was pretty much this, you know, alter ego of himself within, you know, this voice call. And the thing is that, you know, Alex himself, YandereDev, I'll just call him Alex because, you know, from what I remember, he hates being called by his real name. So, you know, and since, you know, with the information that I'm pretty much going to provide later on, I genuinely don't give a shit about this man. So Alex himself, you know, after, you know, hearing this, you know, he felt a little bit uncomfortable because, you know, he didn't feel, you know, he just didn't understand what was going on, alright? So, instead of just asking what was going on, or, you know, what was happening, or why the moderator was speaking the way that he was, instead of just being, you know, a polite, upstanding human being, he decided to just straight up ban the guy just because of the fact that he was under this alter ego and that he had no control over it. And after he was basically informed about all this and ended up, you know, getting rightfully criticized because of this, he made this, you know, grandiose statement on his Discord, as he usually does when he, you know, regards a lot of this stuff. And, well, the statement in and of itself is it's a pretty hypocritical one, if I'm going to be completely honest. And I'm not talking about the internet definition of hypocritical, where, you know, there will be, like, some old shit that someone will end up digging up on someone else, and that other person will look back on it and say, yeah, you know, I don't agree with what I did back then, and it was not, and, you know, nowadays it wouldn't be okay for anyone like myself to do that, and then they call them a hypocrite just because the fact that they don't agree with what they did in the past. I'm talking about the actual definition of hypocrite, and I'll explain why, you know, in just a minute here. So, YandereDev states, "Alright, I've gotta make a statement. I can't take DID seriously. I don't think it's a real thing. I think it's a made-up fantasy that some people indulge in as an excuse to occasionally roleplay as different people." I hate to break it to you, but, it is an actual disorder. It's an actual mental disorder, and the fact that you're just chalking it up to, it just being as, like, a ploy for people to just roleplay as different people is just really ignorant in my opinion, in just the lightest terms possible that I can say regarding this, just in and of itself, it's just very ignorant for you to think of it as, that. But, I can't take it anymore. I can no longer pretend like it's not the weirdest, dumbest, cringiest thing ever. It makes me uncomfortable and creeps me out. I don't want to see that weird crap in here anymore. I made the decision to remove Chris from the server. Chris is the person in question here. I can no longer play along with someone's weird fantasies or pretend like their silly role-playing is normal. Yeah, this silly role-playing, it's not like, this is the same guy that, pretends like he's in a relationship with Samus and whatnot. It's not like, he's the same person that does that very specific thing that I just mentioned. Oh, wait, he is? Oh, well, okay, well, that's hilarious. He pretty much, he did in fact, release an apology. He did put a thing on his, website, talking about the entire thing, and it seemed, a lot more of like a genuine explanation of what was going on than he usually does. Of course, he still had to, throw in the anti-YandereDev community is being mean to me, and that's why people are assuming this about me, because, he can't go 2 seconds, trying to disprove an argument without, making that as the main crux of his argument. But, honestly, if that were about it, if he actually decided to, genuinely apologize about this and genuinely apologize to this man, then this video would not exist. I wouldn't have felt the need to make this video. But, well, unfortunately, this man lied about that apology. Matter of fact, he actually, there were some DMs leaked about it. DMs leaked from the man himself, not from YandereDev, but the other guy. Basically telling the man that he still doesn't believe that the actual disorder exists. He doesn't believe that it exists, and he doesn't actually give a shit. And another funny thing about this man, so, obviously he lied about his apology. He lied about everything that he had just said. He still doesn't believe in, such a thing. And, this isn't his first run-in with, bashing on mental illnesses and whatnot. I mean, I'm fairly certain that there's posts out there that pretty much, have him saying that, anyone with a mental disorder shouldn't even exist in the first place. I think that was probably a thing. And, it's pretty interesting. And there's a whole bunch of other things that are coming out about him within recent months. Apparently YandereDev was, defending pedophiles and whatnot, which honestly wouldn't be that surprising considering the fact that he's still to this day trying to justify why he put his, underage characters within a porn game. But oh, if it's like, DID or depression, which I'll get into, then you can't hang anywhere around me. Now, Now, let me get into what I just said. He, doesn't just simply bash on DID or autism or anything along those lines. He's an equal opportunity jackass, because another person by the name of Cleveland, who is a pretty decent fan of, YandereDev, as well as Chris, the moderator that was, wrongfully banned just because he had a mental disorder, here's a little thing about what happened with Chris after all that ended up happening, and after, finding out about all this. Chris was basically driven nearly to the point of ending his own life because of all of this that was happening. He was genuinely suffering because of all this. And Cleveland ended up bringing this up to YandereDev himself, and YandereDev basically just did the equivalent of, yeah, guess what, I really don't give a shit. Who cares? I've, quote-unquote, suffered with it because I genuinely don't believe that he was actually depressed at all throughout the entirety of him making his games, throughout the entirety of him, quote-unquote, making his, quote-unquote, game, whatsoever. So, he basically just did the equivalent of, yeah, I don't care, it, he can kill himself if he wants to, it's not my problem. That's basically the equivalent of what he said. He basically just decided to spit in this man, and as well as Chris's face, and piss directly into their mouth, and then their Cheerios immediately afterwards. Because, well, I mean, you know, if you have a mental disorder, well, I guess to YandereDev, you shouldn't even exist in the first place. And you want to know what's funny? Is that after all this ended up coming to light, well, what's very impressive is, you know, a whole bunch of moderators basically just decide to just straight up dip from existence. They basically just decide to nope the living hell away from YandereDev because of all this. And rightfully so, because this man is a jackass. This man doesn't deserve a single bit of sympathy. Honestly, I thought he was beginning to turn himself around, because he actually decided to finally release the game after literally almost 7 years of development hell. But unfortunately, this man is probably so driven on just being the biggest asshole on the internet that it's basically superseded his entire mindset to actually be a decent human being. And, you know, he's decided to just start bashing on people with mental illnesses because, you know, that's a really cool thing to do if you have a following. Honestly, you know, Alex, if you somehow come across this video, go f*** yourself. You don't deserve any sympathy from anyone whatsoever. And I genuinely hope that your entire fan base just ends up leaving you, and anything that you've built up over the years ends up crashing and burning just like it rightfully should have. And I honestly hope that anything that you try and make afterwards ends up crashing and burning twice as fast every single time. Because if anything bad happens to him, why should we care? He clearly doesn't give a shit that he willingly drove someone to the point of them nearly ending themselves. So why should we care if anything bad happens to him whatsoever? And for anyone that watches this that is still supporting him, either financially or not, I just simply have to tell you one thing, and that one thing is a bit of an instruction for you, okay? Those instructions essentially being that you should go out to the nearest tree near your house and profusely apologize for it actually wasting the oxygen that's creating just to keep you alive. But yeah, that's basically the end of this video. I'm way too pissed off to do a formal ending here. See ya.